All right, thank you for watching, everybody. If you're on YouTube, I recommend checking out my website here, www.danceofthecosmos.com. Again, my name is Dan Hendricks, and now we're continuing our series of the Grahas. This is part 4, which part 4 is dealing with the planetary descriptions given for each planet in only one astrological text. We're using Brihat Parasara Hora Sastra. And so, since we're dealing with video 4.6 in this series, the 6th planet is who we are talking about, which the 6th planet in the natural order of the planets is Venus. So let's get right down to it, shall we? Okay. So here we have Venus, and these are going to be the qualities that we will be looking at today. So, of course, the first video we talked about Venus being a gentle feminine planet representing the advisor, minister, because he's a biped, he's looking sideways, he's Rajasic in nature, 4th house about the how we feel about things in life, and Venus representing that intelligence, that poetic intelligence. And why does Venus represent our poetic intelligence? Because Venus is said to be, by Parashara, Venus is said to be poetical. And so we talked about this with poetic intelligence. And what we talk about with poetic intelligence is being able to see derived meaning where there is none. Because Venus is very poetical. Venus's way of talking and describing things is it's not necessarily like that is brown, that is yellow, that is over there to the left, that is 2 feet behind the other object. Like that's kind of a Mercury talking about the spatial dimensions of where everything is and the facts. Venus is not about facts. Venus is because it's about 4th house. It's how we feel about things. Venus, we'll see here, is pleasing, lovely formed, most splendid, beautifully eyed. Venus sees everything, and since it's that 4th house direction, and he sees everything because he's looking sideways. He's dealing with the things that are on this world and how they relate to us as a person. And so Venus, it's seeing the beauty in the world. It's about seeing the things that are existing in our world, and not about the details about those things, but more so it's like the idea of poetical is it's about like, okay, how do I feel about that? Like, oh yeah, it's not describing it, but it's about more so how we feel about it, how the things that we're dealing in this world, the things that we're dealing with in this world, how they affect us and what we're comfortable with, about finding comfort and convenience. And poetical, and then of course poetry. This can get someone involved literally with poetry. This can make somebody, Venus can make somebody a poet, can make someone poet, which involves the skill of writing. And so it can make someone a writer, but when it makes someone a poet, it's like they're describing some kind of feeling that they have inside and using words, of course, for that, but not literally describing those, trying to describe those emotions, but giving a different form, to that. Whereas if you read those words, you're like, oh, that makes me feel a certain way. And that's kind of the idea of poetry. Venus might also make someone who speaks more poetically like that, where you're like, wow, I really feel the message of what they're saying. It's not that I'm hearing literally the definition of what they're saying, but I feel the message behind their speech. And then we're going to see here that we'll start at the top. Venus here is pleasing, because with Venus, it's 4th house. It's a gentle planet that cares about 4th house, gentle nature, happiness. Venus is always looking to please. And when we talk about the planets and what signs they rule, because understanding the signs that a planet rules, we're going to really get into this, and because I already talked about, I did a few videos on the signs, and now I've done quite a few videos now on the planets. And when we start to understand the planets, we're getting the energy of what the planet is. But when you understand the sign that the planet rules, you're going to really start keying into what is the energy of the planets. Like, you'll get a greater depth of understanding in that nature. And so when we see here that Venus is pleasing, he's want to do well by other people because he's such a gentle planet. It's feminine, sees all the things in this world and how they kind of affect the internal nature of the person. And so it's a person that's wanting to find things that are pleasing to it, but at the same time, Venus is about pleasing other people. Venus is involved in our luxuries in life. Venus is involved, for example, has a role in nursing, has a role as like massage therapy, things that make people that are more, make the world a more pleasing place, not just for us, but for other people, because it's thinking about the world in general, you know, how I can play a bigger part in the world and to make it a more pleasing place to be, a better place to be. And then we also know that, because look, Venus is lovely formed. So the idea here, of course, with all of these characteristics, pleasing, if you have Venus in your first house, Venus strongly affecting your ascendant, Venus strongly affecting your ascendant ruling planet, then we know that you might be somebody that is more pleasing. You might have these qualities literally. You might be more splendid and lovely formed, which means you're more beautiful. It means that just the way that you are formed is just more lovely. And then also, we're also seeing here, I mean, lovely formed, most splendid, pleasing, beautifully eyed. So we get this idea that Venus has a lot to do with the beauty of the world. And what is beauty? Beauty is something that is to the eye of the beholder. What's beautiful to me might be a mountain. What's beautiful to you might be the desert. So I might see a mountain that's just rock, you know, and you might see that as, oh my gosh, that's just a barren landscape. And I'm like, oh, that's just a beautiful mountain, the way that it's shaped, because I see it. It's just, I see the lovely form in it. It's pleasing to me. I see how splendid it is. I'm seeing the beauty in the world, and the beauty in the world is to me. As to the eye of the beholder. That's why Venus is that's one of the ways where Venus can be looked at as a Rajasic planet, because it's about the idea of I, the idea of me, how things relate to me. And so Venus with this idea, like, is, and poetical. I mean, it's this idea of like, what is beauty? Beauty is to the eye of the beholder. And so Venus is that, gives us that energy. Venus represents that energy in our lives of what we find beauty in, how we view beauty. And also Venus being lovely formed, not only can that indicate a more pleasing body, but it's like the things that Venus is going to want to create in life. It's going to create something that's more lovely, something that's going to create more beautiful things. And this is why Venus here, being that it's represented as poetical and a lovely form and all of this, and dealing with things that are in the world, this is why Venus is Venus is a karaka for art, for being able to appreciate art, because being able to appreciate art is very much a poetic intelligence. And then Venus here is said to be most splendid. So in this idea of splendid, what I thought, a lot of times when I'm going through these words, I actually will I'll Google each word. So what I did is I Googled splendid. And what I thought was very important when we start talking about the Karaka ships of Venus, when we talk about this, if you look at some of these adjectives, so we see that splendid here means magnificent, very impressive. Now we're going to help to understand the Karakas, because look at this. When we get down here, we start seeing this. We see opulent, luxurious, deluxe, rich, fine, costly, expensive, lavish, ornate, gorgeous, glorious. These characteristics here, that seeing those words with most splendid, you know, most rich, most opulent, that means that Venus is about finding, because when we talk about the Karakas of Venus, we're going to see that Venus represents conveyances and Venus represents luxuries, because Venus has a lot to do with making this world a better place to deal with, making it better for us to enjoy. Whereas Jupiter is trying to just create and just give its goodness, Venus is more like, hey, let's just make this place more realistically a more comfortable place to live. Venus wants to make things more comfortable, more so Venus can represent our cars, and Venus can represent not only our cars, but Venus can represent the nicer things in life, basically. And so it can represent like a Mercedes, or a luxury car. Because you can look at the way you can look at things. So Venus represents cars in general because it represents vehicles, because vehicles make life easier for us to actually get around this planet, and makes us easier for us to travel from San Francisco to New York, because you're sitting in this nice, comfortable vehicle instead of having to walk there, which takes however long that would take. I can only imagine. And so we can see that Venus represents this, and it is these qualities right here which give us an idea of why Venus is going to represent these things as a Karaka. And then Venus is beautifully eyed. This ties right into everything that I've said about Venus, because Venus is seeing the beauty in the world, seeing, oh wow, this is just, it's because it's looking out sideways, it's seeing the things that are on the earth and dealing with the things that are on the earth, and it's seeing the beauty in it. It's seeing how it works, because again, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And then so you can see how all of these really just play into each other, into this idea of Venus, where it represents beauty, but it represents the ability to appreciate beauty. And the ability to appreciate beauty is in the eye of the beholder, so it's going to be different for every single person on this planet. And so then we know that Venus is Kapha and Vata. We talked about this with the moon. So when planets are Vata and Kapha, Venus's ability to appreciate art, it's like a very creative, so Vata represents the air and the ether element. So it's the very most subtle things. Because part of art is its subtlety, not necessarily that's a green art. That painting right there, it's got more green in it than anything else. Well, that is one way to look at it. But Venus, it's that poetical idea is very subtle. It's like I see the subtlety behind that. That's just that's really incredible. And then Kapha represents Kapha can represent contentment. I've talked about what these doshas mean. And so when we have a Vata and Kapha, it's like Venus can be very creative. Venus can see and appreciate the beauty in art and see the subtle little differences between things. But it's also, Venus on the other hand is also very Kapha. Venus is, wow, I see the subtlety in that and how that makes me feel. Wow, I feel contentment with what I see in the world because I see it as a pleasing and a lovely, splendid, beautiful thing in this world, and it makes me feel, because Venus is about that fourth house nature, that internal part of us, and Kapha itself is about our happiness and contentment. So we see how Venus can be that. And then Venus being Vata and Kapha, the same things about being Vata and the same things about being Kapha apply to Venus. Vata, like I said, creative, the ability to be able to go from here to there and not be held down, and to be able to traverse many different directions at once. But also, with Vata energy not properly balanced, is kind of spacey and kind of lost and can't focus in the world. And then Kapha, we just talked about Kapha with Jupiter on the previous video. Kapha can represent being happy and contented and stuff, like I mentioned, but Kapha can represent being inert. And when you have Vata and Kapha, one of the things that both Vata and Kapha, if they are because Vata represents movement, because it's the air and space, so it represents like contraction. Like if you have less space, then the air can't move anywhere. And then with Kapha, it's a tendency towards inertia. So an afflicted Venus can be people that kind of get stuck in life because they can't see the beauty in it, and then they can't find pleasure with the things that they have in the world. So there's a tendency to become stagnated and stuck. That's what Vata and Kapha, that's what they share. The characteristic that they share is that when they're imbalanced. When they're not, they're very happy, wonderful, creative people. Now also we see Venus has curly hair. Well, curly hair, what do we know about curly hair? Well, here in the States, here in America, I don't know how it is across the rest of the world. One of the things that a lot of women do is they put curlers in their hair. Because why? Because we see curly hair as more beautiful. So this is another idea of Venus can literally give you curly hair. You might naturally have more curly hair if Venus is strongly affecting your ascendant or your ascendant lord, or something of that nature, or Venus is that ascendant lord. Then possibility that you might have more curly hair. Your hair might be more curly than the other people in your family, for example. And also it might make you more beautiful. Curly hair is kind of viewed as more beautiful. So anyhow, that kind of wraps up the idea of what we're looking at when we're talking about Venus, and we're really starting to understand and really dive into understanding at a deeper level by just using Brihat Parasara Hora Sastra and what we've learned so far to gain a better understanding. And there will be more of these videos on the way. And thank you for watching, and namaste.